Okay, welcome everybody. That was a brief showcase on skill points, so let's just jump right into it. So, over the past couple months, few weeks, there's been this debate on skill points, on diminishing marginal returns. Are skill points worth it? So, let's see if we can figure that out from this video. So, to start off, diminishing marginal returns are a thing. That's a fact. The more skill points that you put into something, in any of these categories, the less return you will see overall. The biggest return that you're going to get is the first 100 points, 100 skill points into any specific category. Be it might, health, dom, resto, vite, precision. That's going to be your biggest return. When you go from 100 to 200, that's going to be your lowest return. That's going to be your lowest return. The investment from 100 and 200 is pretty terrible. As you can see from the numbers on the screen, everything is less than 1%. Every one of the returns that you get. From 200, 300 is a little bit better, but it's still nowhere near it was as the first 100 skill points. 400, when you go from 300 to 400, it's definitely, 3 times in some instances, 7 times in other instances greater than what it was before. And when you get to max, the same thing to the return. So yes, you get less buffs from continuously investing in one particular category. But you do get an increase from going from 0 to 440, as you can see on the screen. 20.5, health 23.5, 31, 29, 30, so 36 for precision. So there is an increase. It's just every level you get less of an increase. So the first 100 is where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. With that being said, that doesn't mean that skill points are unimportant. They actually are important. Since you get the biggest buff for every 100 points, if you're a DPS, let's use that example, you get your 19% increase for putting 100 into might. You may not want to jump directly into building up or maxing out might. Now you can jump into health. Then you can jump into dominance for the shields. And restoration, since both of those work in tandem with how strong your shields are, and the healing from the shield using the White Lantern shield. Precision for the damage. Vitalization you may not jump into as a DPS, which is fine, or pretty much any other role except for troll, which is fine, but then you can take that 100 skill points because you still have your criticals that you need to do, and you have other things that you need to focus on those skill points, and we'll talk about that in a second. But ultimately, what it comes down to, just in investing your skill points, gaining skill points is not a bad thing. Now, just maxing out one stack and avoiding all others, that is not the best way or best use of your skill points. So, personally, I would avoid that. And yes, the person who's been talking about the diminishing margin of returns is correct in that you do get less of return. But if you allocate your skill points in different places, then you'll get the best bang for your skill points. So now, let's jump into this talk about skill points. Every role has a different amount of skill points that will make them optimized. So that's why when I put it together, I have the min-max. So you can max out your skill points. I'm not at 900 yet. I play DPS and I play tank on Lord Aiden. So, 2 different stats. So let's break down with it. So it's going to be different for everyone because it's dependent on your play style, on what you're going to use your skill points for. So I just put what I believe is the most beneficial for every role. Now, certain DPSs won't use certain things, like weapon mastery. I don't see anything wrong with having weapon mastery. I think it's actually a benefit to everybody because there's extra damage for a healer or a troll. It's extra damage that you get that can potentially, if you're one of the last ones in the raid, or the raid's going to fail and it's you in the tank or you in one DPS, that little extra bit of damage can definitely help clear the boss, clear the last boss, save the raid, whatever it needs to be. So I don't see anything wrong with that, so I added that into my min-max. So it takes 19 skill points to do the weapon mastery of brawling into martial arts Shuriken Storm. So that's how many skill points for that. Now the other skill points is your movement mode. I think all power sets need that accelerated movement. Gadgets, flying, gliding, super speed. Everyone needs that accelerated movement mode to keep up, to get out of danger, whatever it is. So that's something that's beneficial and important. The other 6 in the movement mode are your innates. Knockback recovery. I can't recall right now offhand what they all are, but those innates are good to have. Some of them give you power back when you break out. So it's just good to have those just to get that extra boost of support ability for yourself. So I put that you need about 7 skill points, you need 7 skill points to do that. 1 in the movement mode and 6 in the innates. So let's see. Now let's talk about the iconics. So the iconics is where it gets very tricky for every role. So actually, let's look at the iconics. Now for iconics, every role needs something different. Every role is not going to use the same bit of iconics. So let's see, robot sidekick. A tank is not going to use robot sidekick overall. So that's not something that's going to be included in an iconic for a tank. A DPS may use it. So a DPS needs more iconics than the other roles, because that's why I put it dependent on luck and skill and power set. Not skill, but power set. Because luck is for the lasso, spore pod, bat swarm. Those are all lucky things. The sunstone, that I can't remember the rest of it, those are all dependent on luck, dependent on how much bankroll that you have on your tune. Those were the only ways to get those, so that's dependent on luck. Also, Star Bolt from Starfire Star Bolt, that's also luck too, because you may have missed out on that. So if you have those items, you may want to put a skill point in them, so that way you're able to use them in different builds. An armory, you may have one armory for single target, melee range, max range. It just all depends. AoE, so you'll need skill points to be able to consistently have those available to use whenever you want to use them. Now a tank is going to use less than all these. A tank may use magma, sunstone, what else, hard light shield. It may use some of the dazing abilities for crowd control, mesmerizing lasso for single target pull. So it just all depends. So that's why the numbers are all over the place depending on the roles. A healer may not use anything out of here. They may just use Starbolt. That may be it. And hard light shield. Troll the same. So it's just all dependent on your power set and what you're going to do on how many skill points that you allocate for iconics. So I just put the maximum that you could. So I think for a DPS it was 14 if you got every iconic that you can use. Now with all that being said, let's talk about the roles. So a DPS to min-max, to put the minimal maximum skill points in every category to be the most optimized that they can at their role. About 401 skill points is what they would need. You have 100 in your health, 100 in your might, 100 in your precision. You have critical attack chance, critical ability chance. You have every one of those maxed out, and that will give you your most optimized. I keep saying the word optimized, but that'll give you your best bet at doing your job and doing your role. Now for the support roles, it's a lot more, because DPS is fairly simple of what you're doing. It's straightforward. You're relying more on your abilities and more of the iconics and everything else. Now for a troll, there's a lot more that you need to add than you did with DPS. So with troll, you are adding in the dominance, and you're also adding in your vitalization with that. And then you also have the 20 and the 10, the critical power chance, and I forget what the other one is right now offhand. But with those added categories that you need to add skill points to make yourself the top at what you need to be, you need more skill points for that. So again, I had that at 627 skill points is what you need to be the optimized controller, to have the bare minimum maximum amount of skill points to get the best return for those skill points. Okay, so next we'll talk about a healer. The healer needs more skill points than controller, simply because for the critical heals it's 2040 instead of the 2010 with the troll. So there's an additional 30 that you need just from there by itself. So with that being said, that brings the heal at 652. Yeah, 652, 657. I need to double check my numbers. But that's how many min-max that the healer would need to be beneficial. Now, I always add skill points in the might categories because, as I said before or earlier in the video, if it's just you, like the raid is going to shit, and it's just, you know, the support roles, healer, tank, controller, that extra bit of damage that you're getting from, you know, your support roles does a lot to help continue and finish the raid. And if you have the skill points, it's better to put it here than to put it, you know, a 300 into your restoration, because you're not going to get that significant of a boost with it. And lastly, for all the roles, we're going to talk about tank. So let's talk about just the skill points in general of itself. So because I'm fire, I do max out my critical healing, and I also max out my might, and I put one in resto, dominance, health, might, and I also put one inside of precision. So I put 100, excuse me, into those. I max out the 4 up top, and then I put 100 into each and every one's. Before we even finish, don't worry about super powered, hybrid, precision. Choose whatever you like. Yeah, there's a 5% increase if you use hybrid. I don't use hybrid. I prefer the extra power that I get from being in might. So, you know, that's all dependent on what you're comfortable with. But, you know, everyone's going to have different one skill point that they allocate there. But anyway, back into it. So yes, I max those out, and then I go to the lower trees, and then I put 100 into each and every one of them. Now, the movement mode for tank especially is important to make sure you have all your nates done, the 6 and 8s. The one for the super movement mode, accelerated movement mode. And then with the tank, there's options. So you can put another 3 to 4 skill points in if you're going to use the for super speed, dash attack, or whatever the supercharges that I can't recall right now offhand. So you have options to be able to do that if need be. Because I have 865 skill points, I will put a skill point in that in case I want to try it out and I want to use it. So I have options on the fly, like if I watch a video and I'm like, oh, this sounds interesting, you know, I have the option to go and try it right then. And if I find it interesting, I'll just keep it and use it and play around with it, and I have to go and consistently respec every time I switch my armories. And then we have we'll talk about the weapon. So most tanks aren't using weapon mastery because you don't have to. You're not you know, range farming for Shuriken Storm. You're not doing any of those things. Again, how many skill points that you put in your weapons is all dependent on you. I do have weapon mastery on my tank. I use one-handed into dual wield, the flip slash, or whatever it is, just because I like it. And also I do have the one-handed into the hand blasters, again, because that's what I prefer to use. But everyone can use whatever they choose. And for iconics, there's many different iconics I can use with the tank, and again, it's dependent if you're lucky. Magma Vortex, the Sunstone iconic, Exabyte Steel, which we're going to talk about in more depth in another video because I found some interesting things about it. But you know, there's plenty of options on iconics that you can use. Now, opposed to going in and putting one skill point or respecing to test it out, because I have the skill points, I'll put one in there, and one skill point is going to make or break my build, so I have it ready to test out and use in different situations. So with that being said, if you use without the weapon mastery, you need 646 skill points. With weapon mastery, you need 661 skill points. Okay, with all that information shared, with all that to be said, here's a synopsis of the video. Diminishing marginal returns is a thing. The more skill points that you put inside of one specific category, the less a return that you will get on it. Now, does that mean skill points are not important? No, skill points are very important. To max out everything you need to max out to be the best in your role, you should try to get as much as possible. Farm, do events, do feats, you know, get with people in LFG who are not shouting about political stuff and trying to do feats. Just, you know, play your game, grab your skill points and allocate them in the best places to allocate them for your role. It's not a bad thing to chase skill points. It's not a bad thing to get skill points. Skill points are important in the game. They may not be the most important thing in the game, but they are important, especially in early stages and actually in some end game stages too. Artifacts may trump skill points, but they're neck and neck because you need them to be effective. You can complete a raid with 100 skill points. Will you struggle? Potentially. If it's 8 people with 100 skill points, that's going to be probably the hardest raid in the game. You never know. So with that being said, here's my 2 cents. I appreciate everybody taking the time out to watch and listen. More videos on the way, so hopefully you hit that like and subscribe, and I appreciate everybody taking the time out to watch. Have a good one.